Welcome to Lost to the Nails, episode 9. Almost Battlefleet Gothic Heresy and actual Horus Heresy impressions. This title was slapped together rather quickly. We realized that we aren't going to have time to do the full Battlefleet Gothic coverage, and Heresy has been enough of a thing that we got to come up for air and take a look at that one. And Eric, I know you've been playing that one a lot recently.
Yeah, this is a Heresy podcast now, y'all. There's no stopping it.
Well, it is till we get to part of the news, because, man, at some point it's going to turn into a World Eaters podcast. So, yeah, because, I mean, even looking at this, I mean, that last episode took me a long time to get to editing it. I mean, I want to say that when I checked the log that we use for recording stuff, we recorded that end of March, and it just released in June. So we haven't recorded anything in 2 months. So there isn't, I'm not even sure. I can't even think of what, aside from the Heresy stuff, I can't even think of what other type of news stuff has come out. We'll cover some of the stuff that just came out. Today they did the skirmish preview. We're recording this on a Sunday. And yeah, this is going to turn into a Goliath Maulers podcast at some point too. Yeah, we're just going to get yanked all over the place by Games Workshop's release schedule, so I don't have too much of a problem. So,
which is why we called this podcast "Lost in the Nails."
So, last couple of months, I mean, anything to note that you've been up to that would be sort of relevant to the conversation, aside from a lot of Heresy?
A lot of Heresy, as folks who probably follow me on Twitter know. Beyond that, I think we've both just been really busy. So a lot of it has been, work and stuff like that. I had one of those. I've taken a business trip and did not have time to unpack my suitcase before I took another business trip. So now there's 2 suitcases full of dirty laundry. A lot of stuff like that. So I think we've both just been really busy. I've mostly been doing Heresy related stuff. The local campaign is winding down. It's now 3rd season. So I need to write up the sort of thing for that and reset the battle honors for that, because people are getting a little out of control. But yeah, that's been about it. It's been nice. I've had a really quiet couple months where I haven't had the urge to buy a bunch of stuff from GW, and that is coming to an end.
Yeah, I actually have been I think I'm a little ahead of you on the having to buy everything curve. So at the end of, like you were mentioning, I didn't travel anywhere, but it was just, ending up the year. I didn't realize how burnt I was until the end of the year finally happened. And I was like, good God, how did I not get fired? Because, man, my inside voice was barely inside. I mean, it was the filter was completely off, and I was fresh out of fucks to give right at the end of the year there. But yeah, just everything so far. This is what's crazy about the release schedule. So much stuff has been coming out that is just right up my alley. That the Chaos Codex came out, and I mean, I already had a PDF of it from testing and stuff like that, but it took me a week to go pick the thing up, because Chaos has just gotten shifted down the totem pole, with other projects that are coming up and all the Heresy stuff. And I feel like that the whole meme thing of the guy, there's like the 2 buttons to push, and he's like sweating, except for it would be like the Chaos Knights army box, the Heresy box, more Titanicus stuff. It's just, but it's a great place to be. And, gaming wise, I've gotten a couple of 40K games in using the Tempest of War deck, which I've only had one game where I've enjoyed every game, but I've only had one game where my opponent clearly, it's not that he had a bad time. He was just like, this isn't for me. And it was an edge case thing where he was playing a Deathwing army, and he was getting the draws where it was like he had 2 actions come up that he was supposed to do.
And you're like, what am I even going to do? Turning off half my army.
He can't. Yeah. And when you're playing a Deathwing army, you can't have 9 Terminators, go plant a flag or do something stupid. Like they need to do everything they're going to do. I mean, there were mistakes that he made in it that it made the game a lot more lopsided also, because it's just, I haven't played a Drunken Commander style game in a long time. And man, just from playing Dark Eldar, you had to really be on your toes back in the day before they were what they are now to really make sure you were playing the mission. And I just kind of ruthlessly played I was playing Death Guard too, so it was a little easier to win the primary of, the table things and everything. But other than that, all the people that I've played against have enjoyed it. And a lot of players I know in the area that are that have kind of fallen out of 40K this edition because they're just not into the whole secondary system. When I show it to them, they're like, oh, this is Drunken Commander with the new secondaries basically, and I don't have to, you're not going to show up and run into some sort of a skewed edge case. Versus like the Deathwing player, he had built his army around 3 particular secondaries. And so so for him, it was a matter of bad draws, and it was also a matter of his army wasn't built for it, so it was
it's designed for a different system. Like even with Tempest of War, you have to look at the secondaries and be like, if I draw this, can I do this?
Yeah.
And if the answer to like 50% of those is no, that's probably a bad time.
Yeah. So we'd gotten some feedback like in our Discord group and things like that, and there were a lot of people that Tom from the 40 Curious podcast, which by the way, we will have to plug at the beginning and the end of this. I was just on episode 4. I think you're on episode 5, correct? That's coming out?
I'm on episode 5. Yeah.
So I'm actually going to go ahead and put up, upload those to if you're a subscriber to our show, you're going to get those automatically. I'll tack a little thing on the beginning of it so you know what's going on, that you didn't accidentally turn something on. And fun discussions with those. But he and Tom and other people that have sort of commented, I'm surprised looking at how many people actually say that they've played Tempest of War quite a bit and really, really enjoy it. And we played also with the new metered command point style. And I got to say, I actually do prefer that style over the original, getting the big giant glut of them. And because you know what, I'm just as broke turn 3 on command points as I am, Unfortunately, this Death Guard player somehow had, because he bought upgraded characters and extra relics and things. He started out with 0 command points, and I was like, oof,
that sounds rough.
Yeah, but he was into it. So also,
I think that's a lot of the feedback I've gotten from the local group from folks who do play sort of more match play style games is both they like the Tempest of War and the new CP distribution.
Yeah.
Tamped some things down. That was nice. And for me, Tempest of War is probably the default I'd have for playing 40K with strangers.
Yeah.
Because Crusade involves so much negotiation, and I'm really skeptical of the random your Crusade army can play my Crusade army and the CP bonus will make up for it. No. That doesn't work.
No.
So I'm actually really interested in Tempest of War as sort of the, to kick back to the old independent characters, the sort of pre-negotiated social contract where it's like, these are the cards. This is a pretty straightforward game. Yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah. And the last thing for feedback, it wasn't that long after I released the last episode, I got a message from, I'm gonna forget what the name was. I'm terrible with names. One of the people from Sister Act thought it was hilarious that we mentioned their show, and apparently that I got such a laugh out of their being that. And then he even sent me some of the artwork, and apparently there is one where somebody did like a Sister of Battle, but it's Whoopi Goldberg, and I'm just like, it's too much. It's too beautiful.
It's too perfect for this world.
Too perfect for this world. So go check out the show. I'm gonna have to listen to it because they were talking about us doing something at some point. So I'm gonna have to actually break my. I don't listen to podcasts that Eric isn't guesting on for the as far as gaming podcasts go the last 2 years. But okay, really quick Games Workshop news. The big one, of course, is Big Red. So we got a potato cam picture of Angron. There were clearly new-ish looking berserkers with weapons that aren't normal, and I don't know if they were cultists or I wish beastmen or something in the back with giant glaives or whatever. But Games Workshop, within half a day, put out the real photos of Angron, and even if it was a potato that just said Angron and with an axe shoved into it, I still would have loved it. So, Eric, I think you're going to have a much more objective opinion on it. What's your take on the Angron model?
So I think the Angron model is interesting because I don't like it because I don't like Angron. Mm-hmm. I think it's a perfect rendition of what I imagine Angron to be. Mm-hmm. Like when you look back at like the old artwork where he's just got this sort of spiky, elongated, screaming face, like the model is that.
Yeah.
The chaos aesthetic doesn't particularly draw me in. So it is to me the perfect model. Mm-hmm. Because it's something I am excited for the people who are excited about it. I am enthusiastic about wanting to see it on the tabletop across from me.
Right.
And I don't want to buy and paint it.
Right.
And that is just flawless victory as far as GW is concerned. I imagine for you, it's a little bit more like GW is currently rifling through your wallet.
It's fine. Just every time they post something these days, I'm just like, because also they posted the leagues of Votan,
the
whatever,
little tiny Terminators,
the little mini exo armor, and I just every time they post something these days, I swear I'm just like, just shut the fuck up and take the rest of my money. Like it doesn't matter anymore. So, yeah, the Angron model. Initially I was surprised because for some reason I'm thinking of the classic drawing, you know, the illustration where we get the design for the face, you know, the elongated face with all the cables going into it and everything. Mm. For some reason, because that picture is only of the, you know, the face, and you get part of a hand or an arm with an axe in it or whatever the thing is. I always pictured Angron being, based on that illustration, being a little bit less squat and bulky. But now that it's out and I'm looking at it, that actually makes way more sense, because it's not like Angron was. I mean, that's the critique I have of like the Forge World model for Angron pre-Ascension, is that he's a little too lean. You know, like he's always described as being this, you know, just hulking mess, you know? And so, yeah, the model to me is perfect. There are enough. I wish there would have been a few more nods to the classic model, because there are like sort of the, you know, leather strap tassel things hanging down from the shoulder guards that like on his Heresy era model and things like that. But whatever the fuck, it's fucking amazing. I'm gonna when it comes out, the second it comes out, I'm buying it. Anything that's new with World Eaters on it, I'm buying it. I don't know. So, I mean, it's too bad that, I mean, it really does appear that the thing was genuinely leaked, you know, with the way, because, I mean, I would buy the conspiracy, the Games Workshop potato camera thing. I would buy that if it wasn't such a fast turnaround, you know, if it was like, they did it on Friday and then like the following Thursday they responded, you know, like, but doing it in the same day, it's like trying to get out in front of something that's already left the barn. And it's just, to me, it's just sad that's...
And right before you have a preview event where presumably Angron was supposed to be talked about, and, you know, you've got video footage for it and stuff.
Yeah.
You wouldn't make that if you were intending on scooping yourself the day before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's too bad. But I mean, whatever the case, I mean, internet's going to internet. It's going to be what it is. I know you didn't get up and watch this because I accidentally was awake and forgot that this was happening today. But they did the skirmish preview today, and all I can say is Goliath Maulers. I have a type. I can't help it. I like him.
You and Campbell from the Badcast have a muscle bunch weakness.
Yeah, and I don't know what that's about, and it's fine. It's fine. Just I will take it all. The rototiller Ashways Batmobile with a grenade launcher on it. I can't say no to that kind of, and chains and mohawks. I mean, I just can't say no to that. So
yeah, I don't know what I was imagining the Goliath vehicle would be before this, but then I saw that model and I was like, yeah, obviously that.
Right.
Which is, I think, always a sign of good design, is when you're like, oh no, that's very clearly what this was supposed to have been this whole time.
And then the last one, I know this is the one that you appreciated out of it. Tell us about the last Kill Team one.
So the last Kill Team that they're putting out for this is they've got Kroot and the Imperial Navy, which is not something I saw coming.
Yeah.
We've got essentially naval armsmen. They're calling them breachers. Mm-hmm. I have a deep weakness for Void War in 40K. It's my preferred sort of what are we fighting over is obviously the interior of a spaceship.
Yeah.
and I had hatched upon a scheme for some narrative stuff to make a bunch of not Goliath, the biker gangers.
Mm-hmm.
I had intended to make a bunch of them into ship crew,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of make some homebrew rules for them. And now Games Workshop has taken care of it for me and come out with really cool models and presumably rules for them.
Yeah.
And so solved. But I love them. They've got shields and nasty looking guns and helmets, because put your damn helmet on, it's in space.
Right.
Just over the moon happy with those. Those are my, like, okay, Games Workshop, you got me back. I took a couple months off buying stuff from you. very, very well.
Yeah. The as soon as I saw the naval breachers, I mean, first of all, like, anytime there's terrain that I want to buy, I'm on board.
Yep.
But the naval breachers, when I looked at that, the first thing that popped into my head was, when we get into the heresy stuff, the legit, you can run Lork and all of the his reject crew of dreadnoughts legally in Horus Heresy now with the one rite of battle. But I was looking at, for trying to do like some sort of a scenario of, the Ultramarines storming the Conqueror while everybody's, good old Delvey and everybody else is down on the planet where they shouldn't be. Now you have some, other human elements that you can kind of throw in to, add some little spice to the game and things like that. So I'm super excited for it. And, if you look at the Leagues of Votan thing, the preview video was a space thing. I don't know. I'm just hoping there's a lot more, space stuff where that came from, because Zone Mortalis is fun. As you'll tell us later when you get into Heresy gaming. Later. So that wraps up our intro. This is going to be we said we were going to talk about Battlefleet Gothic. We're not going to talk about it to a full extent. I want to reserve that for like a full episode. And I think it'd be fun to do that one after you get back from Nova, as far as that goes. But what I thought we would do is talk about, we got to sit down a couple of weeks ago and hammer out your fleet list. So I think it'd be fun to kind of talk about that, so we know what your fleet is. So when you get back and we go to talk about how it went and, what you would change and those types of things, people have some sort of a background. So Battlefleet Gothic Heresy, how is this different from regular Battlefleet Gothic?
So Battlefleet Heresy, the idea behind it is you are playing Heresy era fleet engagements, which means there's not the division that there is in the main game between the Chaos Fleet and the Imperial Fleet, because there is no Chaos Fleet yet.
Right.
So the two big elements, one of which this event is ignoring, is they also have rules for all the big Gloriana class battleships. So, the Conqueror and the McCragg's Honor and all that stuff. Those are, hilariously, there are two different versions of those. There is how these appear in the fluff, and then how these appear if you want your game to still be fun.
Right.
Which I think is sort of a funny distinction. But that's the first thing. And then the second thing is in Battlefleet Gothic, there's a series of restrictions. There's obviously the Chaos Fleet and then the Imperial Fleet. And then the Imperial Fleet is divided up into a bunch of like, okay, so this is the, Battlefleet Baka reserve list, which has some older ships in it. And this is, the fleet that defended sort of the McCragg system during whatever Tyranid High Fleet attacked that.
Yeah.
And they have different mix and match options for what ships you can take. Battlefleet Heresy just throws those doors open.
Yeah.
And goes, I don't know, any fleet that was available in the Heresy, take it.
Yeah.
So the designers have sort of gone through, looked for evidence that given ships existed, and then just said, look, if they're there, you can take them.
Yeah.
So you could, for example, mix and match Space Marine battle barges, Chaos Grand Cruisers, and Imperial light cruisers, and that's a valid fleet.
Yep.
And that's really quite cool, and a little bit overwhelming.
Yes. And that's where, so I know going into this, I'd asked you a couple of times, I was like, okay, so what are you going for your overall feel thing and this, that, and the other? And usually I can go into a Battlefleet Gothic list and pound something out for somebody really quick, because it's, there are like different parts that you're going to need. You're going to need these things to strip shields. You're going to need these to finish off ships, these for that, blah, blah, blah. But with removing all of the restrictions, there are some of those ships that end up just being slightly tweaked variations of something that you know from the basic. Like if you're looking like an Imperial Navy, there are some ships where it's like, oh, okay, so that's basically just a Dominator, but they're switching out the prow for this and doing whatever. They took away some of the batteries and added this, so you have some sort of a reference point. But man, as a person who doesn't play a lot, if I were to look, because I opened up the list and got really overwhelmed initially before I started really just narrowing it down to, okay, you need something as a carrier, you need some sort of escorts to do this. Once you started thinking about the roles, then it was just a matter of looking at the ones and figuring out, okay, which ones are cool to you, which ones do you like out of this, and which ones fit your fleet. And then it was a lot easier to narrow down. But those super rare ships that you saw illustrations of that maybe got models, maybe didn't get models, or had to be kit bashed or things like that, I've never really wrapped my head around those because I don't have the opportunity to. It's like I have the basic Imperial Navy stuff, but it's like Endeavor light cruisers. I've never looked at them because I don't have any, and I never will without a 3D printer, which now all of a sudden you can. So
yeah, I think one of the things that Battlefleet Heresy benefits from greatly is the existence of 3D printing, because no one owns the obscure Battlefleet Gothic battleships.
No.
Like, just nobody.
Yeah.
And so I think that was one of the things I find a little bit overwhelming about it, is also with the chaos options, even if you say, okay, you need a carrier, there's like 7 of them.
Yeah.
And I think if you were genuinely new and didn't have someone who played at least a little bit, the last time I played Battlefleet Gothic was like a decade and a half ago. I think you'd find that a little overwhelming, because there's also ships in there that are how your list does the other list's thing. Yeah. So like the durable chaos ships that can like go toe to toe with an Imperial ship, or the somewhat faster Imperial ships. But if you don't need those. Yeah. If the thing that does the thing correctly is also in your list. And so I think that was a little bit overwhelming. So when we went through this, one of the things we did is, and I think this was a very good first question from Brian, is, so do you want this fleet to work in Battlefleet Gothic? Or is this I have a fleet for Battlefleet Heresy that I will play maybe once a year if I go to Nova multiple times? And my answer was, yeah, probably. So the core of it is, for me, Imperial Navy ships. Yeah. Because as I mentioned, I'm not a huge Chaos player, so I don't have like a Chaos fleet or a Chaos army to tie this all into. And then we started talking about sort of theme, which is one of the things that I think Battlefleet Heresy, I mean, if you think about it, it's a fan codex for an out-of-print specialist game of the mostly veterans play this line of Games Workshop. Yeah. Rule of cool and theme should probably win over anything else. Yeah. So that was the second question you asked me, Brian, was just, who are these people? And what are you, like, what are your ships? So for me, that was my sort of headcanon, was I was tying these into the Imperial Fists that I played for Horus Heresy. So this is that fleet having sort of arrived in the Terran system, or it's whatever campaign this is. It's sort of they run into this en route, but they're headed to Terra to help participate in the defense of sort of the sort of Saturnine and Jupiter orbital dockyards. So it's like mostly Imperial Navy ships, enough Space Marines to make it feel like Space Marines. Yeah. Your take was, obviously you should have Space Marine crews on everything, which is funny when you start putting them in Imperial Navy ships, because you're like, yeah, like this random Lunar class cruiser is just full of Space Marines now. Yeah. And then the other things we came to, one of the other ones was, how do you prefer to play? Which, Brian, do you want to talk about that a little bit in our discussions around that?
So the prefer to play thing, I think it'd be good to take a step back and just, so each of the legions have their own sort of little flavor thing that they do. So part of the Imperial Fist, I remember you were saying, was
Nova cannons.
Nova cannons, right? And you don't want to go too crazy with those. We kind of had our discussion on those of, you know, what they're good for. Because Nova cannons are, everybody remembers the amazing, spectacular shot that, if you go to Josh, who I play with locally, if you ask him about Nova cannons, he will talk about me blowing up his, you know, Corsair cruiser, just one-shotting it off the board, right, turn one. The majority of time, though, it's just you're blowing up and displacing space out in the middle of nowhere and just scaring people, you know. So it's really that, and torpedoes are really more of a funneling thing to get them to come to you. But Imperial Fist getting to take them, you're kind of obligated to take them then, you know, just because they're.
Yeah, I was like, this is my special rule.
Yeah. And then the other one was more of a defensive thing, wasn't it? It was I'm trying to remember what it was. It was something that they
force a shift, I think.
Okay.
I can't remember what it was. I can look it up though.
Yeah, just defensively, I guess they shut it down a little. So defensively they have a little thing with that. And so, like, when you were talking about that, like, you want some stuff that's fighting at distance, but you also would like some stuff that can go, if I remember correctly, you were looking for some stuff that can go toe to toe, right? That can go sort of Imperial Fist blowing, you know, up the gut. And you wanted enough of the, like you were mentioning, the Imperial Navy stuff. And so, well, it isn't just playstyle though. It was also the missions that were something.
Yeah. So we also got the mission pack for Nova. Did warn us that due to sort of jankery on the part of the word bearers, that, you know, the Ruin Storm is doing a whole thing, which will make ordnance slightly less reliable than you are expecting it to be. And so we sort of got warned that if your whole shtick is ordnance, you're probably not going to be thrilled with what's going on.
Yeah. So
this one also designed a sort of fairly ordnance light approach to this list. So not a lot of torpedoes. I can see there's a huge temptation, especially because you can take Imperial Navy carriers and then replace those weapons, the launch bays, with Thunderhawks, to just be like all the ordnance.
Yeah.
And so, or Nova cannons. Those were specifically called out as these will be less reliable than you're hoping for them to be.
Yeah.
So like took one because it seems cool, but there was definitely sort of dialing back on the amount of ordnance we decided to actually take in the list, basically to acknowledge that theme. And because honestly, I also don't really like ordnance all that much, and I think you're sort of in that same boat.
Yeah.
I definitely view this as the World War I battleship game in space, and so like, if I don't get to fire a broadside at some point, I'm sad.
Yeah. So as far as, there also was a thing too where you wanted, you know, we were looking at Imperial light cruisers, which I'm an Imperial light cruiser guy. Like when I play my Imperial Navy, like I am Mr. Dauntless. I love throwing those things out there. And that's just the Dark Eldar player at my core that wants mobility and firepower. The Space Marine strike cruisers, to me, those were the really fun edition, because you pointed this out to me. You were like, oh, wait, no, you can replace the launch bays with another bombardment cannon that was forward facing.
Strength 5. Yep.
Strength 5 forward facing. And I was looking at that and I was just shocked. And I'm like, that is amazing. And you can add an extra shield for 15 points. And if you know anything about Battlefleet Gothic, once you have to take shields down. And the way to take shields down is really our volume of fire. So you're going with weapons batteries. Those are a lot better at pulling shields off. They can shoot stuff, but like if you're doing a broadside shot at the nose of an Imperial cruiser, they're only getting hit and wounded on a 6. You know, so that's not what they're designed for. But Space Marine cruisers are a weird thing where in Battlefleet Gothic, they are light cruisers, so they only have, 6 hull points. So 3 hull points and they're crippled, right? You're having a bunch of stuff on them. But they also only have 1 shield. But they have heavy armor. So they have the 6+ armor of the prow or the front armor of Imperial Navy. But then they have 6 up all around, but then they only have 1 shield. And so to me, the Space Marine fleet always suffered from, they can carry, they're kind of a carrier. They can carry some Thunderhawks. They have a bombardment cannon, which is really good, but it fires on the gunnery table, so it doesn't get a whole lot of shots. But when it connects and does a thing, it's really cool. They're good for boarding actions. And they have some weapons batteries on the sides, but they're kind of these really fast, weird generalists that almost need to be taken in numbers, but taken in numbers is a hard thing to pull off. But in the Heresy thing, they were pointing out you can add an extra shield for 15 points, which is a big deal for them. Now, all of a sudden, they're very usable. And you can also get rid of the launch base to add this forward bombardment cannon. I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And you're like, yeah, that's in the 2010 FAQ update. And I literally have just never looked at the Space Marine part of it, because when I was playing the basic one out of the Armada book, they were terrible. They're terrible to play. They don't play like Space Marines or anything like that. So you were able to add those.
That was my memory of them too, is sort of the original Space Marine fleet, where you have a bunch of light cruisers that do a little bit of everything and so do none of it particularly well.
Right. Right. And once they start taking damage, they're
just done.
Yeah, and if you play against somebody who's using a lot of lances, nobody cares about your 6-up armor if you have lance and you only have 1 shield. 1 shield is really easy to take down, and then once you do that, lances are not rare in this game. So, no. Speaking of lances not being rare in the game, oh my god, take us through your list that you ended up deciding on, because man, the battleship I am super excited about, because that's one that I hadn't looked at before.
So the caveat to this is, for this event, we were told to come up with essentially a 2,500 point fleet list, which is a big Battlefleet Gothic game. And then the assumption is parts of this will be parsed out for different missions, so we may never actually use the whole thing. But we decided the first thing is you're going to need a battleship, because if you've got this many points and the 3D printed battleships look great, you should bring one. So we're looking through the various options, and Brian was going through the sort of traditional choices and like, well, the Emperor battleship does this, et cetera, et cetera. And I just went, well, what about the Victory? And Brian went, I don't really know what you're talking about. And then he scrolled down to look at it, because this is all in a huge PDF.
Yeah. And
the Victory is best described as oops, all lances. So it is essentially, what if you just took the standard battleship hull for the Imperial fleet and gave it all lances? So you just said, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go full lance. I'm looking up the stats now, but we decided that's what's going to carry my Nova cannon, because why not? Mm-hmm. And that's also going to be, the fleet flagship, because obviously it's a battleship.
Yeah.
But really what it comes down to is it's 360 points. It's got a 60 centimeter range firepower 4 port lance battery, a 60 centimeter range firepower 4 starboard lance battery, a dorsal weapons battery with the same range to it. And so basically what you do is you point this towards the enemy and you move in that direction. Mm-hmm. And then you turn on the laser light show.
Yeah. Yeah, and 60 centimeter lances, if you're familiar with the game, that's really long. And, to be fair, too, I mean, this is about the points. It's 5 points less than an Emperor battleship. And an Emperor battleship is like kind of the standard that people take. I mean, it's the mega carrier one. And people love Ordnance. I'm not a big Emperor fan. It was mainly because I learned to play without it. The only I finally got one when you printed that one for me, and because they were just with resale before 3D printing, they were hard to get a hold of. But one thing I just noticed, and this won't change your mind because all lances are pretty hot. The Retribution battleship is way better in Heresy, and when I say way better, like it has 50% more firepower in its weapons batteries. Instead of a 12, it's an 18 at 45 centimeters.
So this is a note,
yes,
for folks delving into Battlefleet Heresy.
Yes,
this is a fan codex.
Yeah.
It is probably one of the best produced fan codexes I have ever encountered. But that does mean when you go, huh, that's funny, you should probably check and make sure that that's real.
Right, right.
So that will trigger off this for the retribution. Somewhere there's one where, like, according to this, all of the Dauntless lances are now on swivel mounts and so are not forward facing. They're all three sides.
Right.
Check that and the answer is, oh god, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things where if you look at this and you're like, man, this got way better in Heresy. Trust but verify is, I think, a good rule here. But yeah, the victory is just like, what if we just put lances on everything?
Yeah.
Very sort of, in my mind, a fairly straightforward ship to plan. How do you pilot this thing?
Yeah.
Because the answer is get in lance range. Also, you're always in lance range.
Yeah.
And just start. This is also, we mentioned what we put the Nova Cannon on, so you can start sending both the weapons battery is a 60 centimeter weapons battery, and then the Nova Cannon has a ridiculous range, so you can start interacting with your opponent pretty quickly.
Turn one. Yeah.
Turn one, you can start actually sending fire down range, which is exciting for me.
Yeah.
To support that, we went with some more traditional choices, which is probably not a bad idea. So the probable actual flagship for most of my games is a Mars-class battlecruiser, where you get, weapons batteries, a dorsal lance battery, some prow torpedoes, and a set of launch bays. So you do have sort of a jack of all trades, decent, reliable battlecruiser. Going along with that, we have two lunars. Brian likes to field these in squadrons. I'll see how I feel about fielding them in squadrons. But again, sort of Swiss Army knife, a little bit of lance, a little bit of weapons battery fire. We added two Crusade cruisers, which are, I don't remember what the equivalent is, Dominators?
Yeah, it's a Dominator.
It's a Dominator. That's the all weapons battery version. The idea is those are essentially the victory battleships, younger weapons battery sisters. That is just, again, sail towards the enemy, broadsides, fire the Crusades first, and then all the lances.
Yeah.
We have a Dictator that we put in, again, for carrier duties, presuming this may come up in either small games, where you can't take a Mars-class battlecruiser because you can't fit it in your fleet, or if this, we don't know whether this event is using something like a attritional campaign or something like that. So it's entirely possible the Mars will be reduced to a smoking wreck at some point, and I will want to have some carrier option to keep me from just getting torn apart by everybody else's carriers. So the Dictator is there primarily as a platform for that. Then, as mentioned, two strike cruisers with all the bombardment cannons configuration. Essentially, this is an, if you're not getting the idea here, this is an unsubtle fleet.
Yeah.
This is not a delicate flanking maneuver that will end up, causing problems for you. This is like, okay, you're there, I'm coming to you.
Yeah.
So the idea behind this is, again, this is 8 firepower worth of bombardment cannons firing into the front. That's a lot of bombardment cannons.
Yeah.
These are essentially the escort ships. The idea is this will possibly help discourage other people's escorts from doing clever britches things like trying to get around the flanks, because these are pretty maneuverable. So you can sort of bring those bombardment cannons to bear pretty easily.
Yeah.
One of the other things that was important for me for this is these also start bringing the Space Marine aesthetic. To have enough in there that this feels like a Space Marine fleet, not an Imperial Navy fleet that happens to have a bunch of Imperial fists hanging out on it. Which I think is definitely a risk for Battlefleet Heresy, because the Space Marine fleet is historically not great at fleet engagements.
Right.
And so I think the temptation is to reach into the much more flexible Chaos or Imperial fleet lists for the core of your thing. I can see also how I can work that in with 3D printing. I'll see if anyone's come up with some clever way to do the prows or something. And then 2 squadrons of 3 Gladius escorts. These are the upgunned swords. They essentially take the sword frigate and go, what if tougher? Because Space Marines.
Yeah.
So we have 2 squadrons of 3 of those. the idea is those are the guys keeping my flanks protected, messing with other escorts, things like that. And again, they do bring in some of that Space Marine feel. So there's enough mixed in the thing that you're like, oh yeah, this is visually, there are Space Marine elements to this, which is sort of what I was looking for. Is, this is a Space Marine fleet, but it is a Heresy era Space Marine fleet, and it is intending to do a primarily fleet action sort of war. So it is mostly those things, but also there's enough there that if there is a mission, because we've been told at least one mission is going to involve attacking a planet.
Yeah.
That you've got enough there that you're like, okay, you're playing Space Marines. You're supposed to be good at this.
Yeah.
Why are you not doing this? And the answer is, oh, good news. We have a bunch of bombardment cannons.
Yeah.
Aim them at the planet. We'll be fine.
There's also the advantage too. I mean, besides just thematically, it just makes more sense to have the Astartes crew. From a game standpoint, I mean, it does help with boarding actions.
Yeah.
It also helps from a leadership, because for people that don't play Battlefleet Gothic, you roll randomly for each ship on there. And there are things where sometimes people that are new to the game would get upset because they're playing Imperial Navy, and, they'll roll the highest roll possible for their escort squadron. And then they'll get to like their Emperor battleship and they're like, what the fuck? You can buy fleet commanders that add to the leadership, but they'll roll like the lowest result. And I remember years ago,
captain is some dude who paid for his commission.
Well, and Andy Chambers I remember there was a commentary that he did at one point where he was like, well, if you think about it, frigates and these little lighter ships are going to see more action versus, when a battleship is brought out, you can have somebody that is, it's not a matter of the commander not being experienced. You have the crew that isn't experienced, because a commander can give the best orders at the best possible time and be the greatest leader this side of Jordanolo. But the problem is, if the crew doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, it doesn't translate.
It's possible this battleship hasn't seen combat in a generation.
Right. And so the Astartes table, when you roll, it's basically 1 or 2, you get an 8, which is good leadership in Battlefleet Gothic. 3 or 4, you get a 9, and 5 or 6, you get a 10. And leadership 10 is real good. If on looking at the normal Imperial table for this, if you roll a 1 for a ship, you're at leadership 6. And if you have something like a carrier that is at leadership 6, every time you send out ordnance, you have to reload it. That takes an order. And if you're doing that on a 6, even with rerolls, it's not looking good.
You're going to fail.
Yeah, 2 or 3, you're a 7, 4 or 5, you're an 8, and on a 6, you're a 9. So so from a game standpoint, it helps with boarding actions, hit and run attacks with your capital ships, and also just orders, just all around. So, and it's the fourth thing is the first thing. It fits the theme, and so yeah. So. Yeah. And then rounding. So this fleet, like you were mentioning, I think it's really important. If you haven't played this game, like you were talking about, some people want to get really cute with maneuverability. And, like a new player might look at the Dark Eldar fleet and go, oh, I can scratch build those out of Reaver parts or whatever. And here we go. If the finesse fleets are so hard to play. I mean, even the Corsair fleet, if you're playing against somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, it's easy to rack up points and do things like that. But I would much rather go for, and I think you're going to have way more fun. And this is just me. I have 2 speeds, Dark Eldar and World Eaters, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to Battlefleet Gothic, I prefer a World Eaters type game, where I want to go toe to toe, and I would rather lose in a flaming, smoking wreckage, than win picking something apart, going finesse style. And so this one, I think that, and if you haven't played in a long time, this is, the Vanquisher is a much more forgiving battleship. Like, you can get yourself into trouble with it, but you're going to roll some dice and have some fun on the way there. So even if you do lose it, you still won because you had fun with it. So
yeah, this fleet is very much designed for a combination of, even if I lose, will I have fun doing this? And because I anticipate losing every game I play of this, and that's okay. It's fitting the narrative. We were never supposed to hold the system.
That's right. That's right.
There's that, and then also just minimizing decision fatigue and cognitive overhead with this particular squadron has to do this particular clever thing at this time for this all to go into. No.
Yeah.
The answer is the guns. The ships with the big guns on the side need to be facing the side, and then fire the big guns in the known order that this needs to be fired in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So it's a fun fleet. I mean, I think visually it's interesting. I think it's thematic, and I just feel like this is a fleet you're going to have fun with. And
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hear about how you do with it. And then I think that's going to be the better time to talk about Battlefleet Gothic, is because if you can mix those in and get a refresher game after 10.5 years or whatever it's been.
Yeah.
It'll help to get all that going. So yeah, you'll have to post pictures along the way, because
I will definitely post pictures along the way.
I can't wait for that. So, well, speaking of can't wait for it, the thing that couldn't wait for an episode is our impressions as a diehard fan yourself, and me, a fair weather heresy guy, of the new edition. So let's take a break here, because I need to go downstairs and make sure that my kids aren't going to revolt while we're recording the next segment, and we got to get into this part. And welcome back, Heresy Impressions. So it's been out for, what, about a month now?
Probably about a month.
About a month. I have the box. I've assembled models. I have played 0 games with this. I've kind of perused the rule book a little bit. I had a Titanicus little mini event type thing, game teaching people how to play thing that I've been prepping models for. So I've been trying to avoid painting any of these awesome world eaters. What we're going to go through with this are pleasant surprises, changes we're surprised by. We'll look at changes we weren't. Maybe I might have more of these than you, but not so glad happened. Things we're looking forward to. Things we're not looking forward to. You're seeing a theme here. Zone Mortalis and Eric's Imperial Fist Terminators, because apparently they're living their absolute fucking best life right now. And we'll wrap it up with where we hope that Heresy is going to go as far as releases and things like that. So I think it is important to note, just initially, before we go into any of this stuff, Eric, I wanted to get your thoughts on how they released the rules, because we have the starter box is a fucking amazing value for $300. It's a stupid good value as far as what you're getting in it. So if you're getting the rule book that way, or if you're like, look, I'm good, they do make this 15-pound, I just blew out my shoulder lifting it rulebook that has fluff and all kinds of amazing stuff. And then if you want to go traitor or loyalist, there's I haven't even been paying attention to how much this shit is. I just tell Sky to send me an invoice, and it has a bunch of stuff on it, and I pay it, and it is what it is. I think the traitor and the loyalist books are they're pricey. They're like $70 each, but these books are hefty as fuck. They are pretty amazing stuff. So what were your thoughts on how they sort of released that and how this stuff's been packaged and rolled out?
So I think for me, the starter box is an amazing deal. Is something you mentioned, and I think is sort of the core of it, and one of the things I wanted to see, because I think one of the most sort of formative things around Heresy was the Betrayal at Calth and the Burning of Prospero box sets.
Yeah,
that you just got a bunch of stuff, and importantly, you got a bunch of infantry, to sort of push that sort of Heresy. You should see 60, 70 Space Marines on the field, sort of feeling to it. I know some people were frustrated because the main rule book didn't come out separately for a couple weeks. And I can understand the frustration there, because I don't know. I didn't need the starter set.
Yeah.
What does any of this do? Generally speaking, I like the books. They're a little bit heavy. If I'm being fully honest.
Yeah.
I would love a trimmed down in which we got rid of all the fluff in the books. For those who have played Heresy, the Red Book style.
Yeah.
I would love some of those in the future. I'm glad they didn't do it for this first release, because I want that immersive black book heresy feeling. But they are like, I own all three. You can kill a man with that stack of books.
You can kill yourself.
You can kill yourself. Like I have a separate shoulder bag for the rule books.
Yeah.
Because they're hefty. The bindings on them, not great. But
oh, really?
Generally speaking, pretty happy with them. I will say the organization of them probably could have used a second pass. There is a where does this rule live? And I mean, people will get this feeling over time, and they'll start remembering universal special rules again and things like that.
Yeah. But
there's definitely a where does this live in one of two rule books, and within that rule book, where is it?
Yeah.
Is something that still needs some developing. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it.
Well, to me, it takes. What's interesting is it kind of goes back to that old classic of just type up a cheat sheet. Like you're only gonna. You only
need your rules.
Yeah, and as far as somebody else's, I mean, just ask them what it does, and at the beginning of the game, and just figure it out. It's not going to be that far from what you're doing, because so many of the armies are basically the same. So for me, yeah, it was funny. It was really, I'm one of those guys that as soon as a rule book doesn't work for me anymore, unless it's one of the Eldar codexes, it immediately goes in the recycling. And I just chucked all of my red books into the recycling the other day, just rip the pages out. So then you have to throw the binding up here in a different thing than the paper. But, so with the main box, what I think will be interesting is Spartans were relatively common, because most of the people that were playing this, especially in the Bay, I mean, you have to remember too, I live just south of the Bay Area in California, and there's a lot of tech money up there. So there might be some areas where you don't see a whole lot of Spartans, or legitimate Spartans, like non-China cast ones or something like that. They were just an expensive tank. Now, I mean, that's going to be a weird thing where you're going to have a plan for a Spartan, because people are going to have Spartans galore, so. Yeah. So but also getting 10 Terminators instead of 5. I mean, the 10-man Terminator squad is something you expect to see in Heresy. Not because it's good or anything like that. You expect to see it because the Legion used to, if there was
roll with a lot of Terminators.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say, if there was a unit measuring contest, the units were all too eager to participate in it, and throwing down 10 Terminators in a unit is a pretty good way to have a little measurement contest there. So going in, what are changes that you are pleasantly surprised by?
So I think the change that I have been the most pleasantly surprised by is reactions, and how impactful reactions are. I love this system. It adds a degree of thinking in your opponent's phase. It adds some things where you're like, well, do I want to try to bait this by doing this thing? You have the sort of like, do I want to charge with one unit to eat Overwatch fire because this other unit needs to make it in?
Yeah.
A lot of things like that. They've used that to express some really cool rules in the game. So my favorite one is I think it's called Talons of the Legion, that the Xiphon Interceptor has, where the reaction is when your opponent moves a flyer or vehicle onto the board in their movement phase, your reaction is, if your Xiphon is in reserve, you bring it in from reserve and you make a shooting attack. Because that's what it does. Combat air patrol. That's what it does.
Oh my God.
It's an interceptor. And so I'm like, that is the best way to express a unit that has always had trouble in this game, because Xiphons are just so fragile.
Yeah.
That if they're on the board, they're probably dead.
Yeah.
And so you do sort of want them to sort of, the perfect Xiphon is your opponent brings something in, you make your reserve roll the next turn to bring your Xiphon you shoot with your Xiphon, and then you sort of write off that Xiphon for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
This just does that.
Yeah.
And so I think That's the one I've been the most pleasantly surprised by. I will say they're very impactful at 500 points. And 1,000 points, like they're definitely tuned for larger games.
Yeah.
So in some of our sort of learning games, we've turned off, I think it's Return Fire and Overwatch, just because there's certain units that if they can do both of those in very low points, you should not have shown up to this game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the one I've been the most surprised by. Generally speaking, I have been surprised at how much more streamlined it is, while still feeling like classic 7th ed style 40K.
Yeah. So this is going to be because again, I am the Fairweather Heresy player. I mean, like as soon as 8th edition came out for 40K, I was pretty fed up with 7th. And there are a lot of things about 8th that I liked. I would put this in as a thing initially that I was disappointed that didn't happen. I wanted to see the AP system from 40K get translated into this, and it didn't. And when it didn't, when we started seeing like leaked things or, previews of things, you could see from the weapon profiles that wasn't a thing. And I was disappointed initially until I started reading the rules for weapons, because there were so many weapons before where like, I love the idea of the all heavy bolter support squad. I mean, that's the Crimson Fist player in me, right? Where I love it. You're rolling dice and stuff, but on the tabletop, 10 heavy bolters really didn't do a whole lot. Especially if you're looking at a system where it's like, oh, and then I have, Captain Hero Face here with 2+ armor who's going to tank all that stuff. Those type. There were just ways where it just didn't make any sense. And now with adjusting some of the profiles where they added additional shots, they made distinctions between a regular autocannon that a Space Marine's carrying and a, dual Gravis or whatever. They mix Gravis into a lot of these weapon names.
Yeah,
but
Gravis is their new favorite word.
For whatever fucking reason. So yeah, the Gravis, Contemptor autocannon or whatever the fuck it is. But doing little things like adding rending to autocannons, all of a sudden they become viable. Now you're fishing for 6s, but if you have 10 autocannons in a unit or 5, I mean, because I do have a squad with 5 autocannons, and I love the unit, but I only brought it for certain games because if you shoot in the old system, it would have just bounced off of Land Raider. Well, but if on a 6 I get to add an additional D3, now all of a sudden I can actually do something every once in a while. So it isn't completely terrible. And I was hoping they would move vehicles to wounds also, but moving dreadnoughts to I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out with dreadnoughts having a wounds characteristic and vehicle staying with the regular armor value thing. But with the little tweaks they did, like even with rotor cannons having pinning and stuff like that, like the little rules, the little tiny tweaks that they made, all of a sudden all those weapon options that before I never would have done anything with, because I like rolling dice as much as the next guy, but I didn't have time for rotor cannons before. And now with pinning, I'm afraid too many people are going to have time for it.
Yeah.
So
I think that it did really impact those sort of mid-strength weapons, like you mentioned. So, auto cannons, rotor cannons, things like that, where now they do something.
Yeah.
And you're not just hoping to play a militia player where your rotor cannons suddenly matter.
Yeah.
I think it's a big thing. I will say, having had my my Terminators essentially get bogged down with a Contemptor Dreadnought, the Dreadnought's moving to a proper unit profile instead of the vehicle one is a big deal for Contemptors. It's a really big deal. I also liked, it's just little things like they simplified the challenge system. I'm glad they kept it in. But like now the overkill you do just counts for combat resolution is just a really simple way to do that.
Yeah.
Not needing to do lookout stir anymore. They've killed a lot of things where the game suddenly stops while you roll 10 dice one at a time.
Yeah.
They've gotten rid of most of those, and I'm honestly glad they did.
as far as, are there any other changes as far as, because I'm just thumbing through the list right now. There are some units that are missing. Not a lot. I mean, because they came out with like the equivalent. I thought the wording was interesting because they make this distinction at the beginning of the PDF that came out for the stuff that wasn't in the initial, Heretic and Loyalist books. And I'm trying to remember the exact language they used on it. It was something along the lines of, these are from the core list or the expanded list or whatever the thing is. I mean, did that, I mean, I don't know enough about how events are run for Heresy things, but to me, that looked like if somebody wants to not deal with those things that are in the PDF, just say that your list must be chosen from the core list.
The core. Yeah.
And
I think Nova will be the first big Heresy event. And they're still tuning their event pack. So I don't know how events are going to handle it yet.
I would assume at the beginning that they're going to have to keep them, because if you have something like, if you have an assault ram, right? I mean, that's something that you've built your army. If you have a pair of assault rams and you're like, this is my army, this is what I built it around, to not be able to use those all of a sudden would be rough. Losing in the standard list. I mean, I remember when I went through, of course, dreadnoughts are one of the first things I go for after I looked at the World Eaters rules and just like the core troops. Losing the box dreads, from the core list, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then, of course, they were in the PDF. But what wasn't in the PDF was the, oh my God, what are the janky contemptors? The Cordis,
the Contemptor Cordis.
Yeah, that's something that didn't make the cut. And it was something they also never made a model for, so I don't think it's the biggest surprise in the world that it didn't make it. But I don't feel like the game lost anything by not having that unit. And you can still field it as a Contemptor if you did do
the answer is just field it as a Contemptor and you're fine.
Yeah. What are things that didn't change that you're glad stayed for this
vehicle
edition?
Facings. I'm a huge advocate of vehicle facings. Given it's a setting where everything comes in a rectangle, there aren't wave serpents where you're trying to figure out what the hell is the side of a wave serpent.
Right.
So for me, keeping vehicle facings for that, I think I said this in like the Badcast Discord or something, where I was like, I just want my fixed gun, like tank destroyer in a hold down position somewhere. I want that to have mattered.
Yeah.
And in 9th edition, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so I just sort of want that back, and that's back. I think that's the change I'm most glad they didn't do anything with. And then templates, because templates are back and I love them. Like opening the box and it just had a thing of templates and the 2 red whippy sticks was just like, hello, my old friends. Like,
oh, real talk, real story. I'm in here at my hobby desk. I've got that box out. I've got a bunch of stuff. I'm going on a hobby bender. It's glorious. My kid walks in, my 4-year-old, and picks up the 2 whippy sticks that are together and goes, Dad, what's this? Oh, it's something for measuring. Oh. Do you need it? No, I don't need those. Can I have it? And I almost fucking said yes. And then I was like, in the back of my head, I slapped the front of my head with the back of my head and just went, you fucking moron. What are these things known as? Whippy sticks. I'm not going to give a whippy stick to a fucking 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. Like, I am just creating my own hell by doing this.
Start. Yeah.
Yeah. So I cut them in half and put them in the garbage because I was like, I don't want to listen to the screaming over this thing. But yeah, for me, honestly, mine's going to be less stuff that I'm glad they didn't change and more stuff that I thought I was going to be disappointed that it stayed in and ended up actually appreciating it. I am back with you on weapon facings. I wasn't for 8th. I liked how streamlined 8th was, even in 9th. I'm okay with it for that type of play, but for Heresy, you're right. It needed it. The armor value system, I'm weirdly okay with, because I don't need all of the weapons. I don't need a heavy bolter to be damaged too. And there are different, oh God, and man, this is just me.
Brutal.
Brutal. Thank you. I was like, this is me not remembering the rule and definitely not writing it in my notes. Yeah, brutal. So there are certain ones where they do additional wounds, which is perfect. So if Angron's swinging at a contemptor, he doesn't have to wound it 6 times. I mean, if he has brutal 2, then it does, additional damage. So that part of it, I didn't know that was going to be something that I would want to see again. And when I saw it, I was like, I kind of miss it after having the other, and I actually do like having that little bit of crunch. And the extra reactions to me are something that, on one hand, I think I was like, oh God, please don't go to a command point system where we have rerolls and this other kind of shit. Because when you play something like Titanicus, you really get an appreciation for how there are just way too many rerolls in 40K. Just way too many. Everything's rerolled. You just assume everything's rerolled. And not having that, and like, no, decisions actually matter. I don't know. There's stuff that I had shit on a lot at the end of 7th that I'm strangely okay with. Especially now that they've changed the movement values where things have like a set value rather than all infantry or this, all light vehicles or that, or heavy.
And I really like that they've gotten rid of. I think they've kept some core unreliability where things like there's less rerolls. So yeah, you can miss. Like you can just whiff a turn, and the answer is like, yep, that happened.
Yep.
But at the same time, they've gotten rid of a lot of randomness with things like run moves. Run moves are now just your initiative. You just go that distance.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff like that where they've trimmed some of, I think, the extraneous dice rolling.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an interesting depth to it. Honestly, I mean, the more that I pour over this, people in my area want to do a kind of a slow grow league thing because there are a bunch of people that are just getting into it. And initially, I was like, oh, I'll use that to paint up my box, but I think I might do it to do more of the grunt work, like rebasing my old. Because my infantry were all painted when they were on 25. So I mean, that's what came. They came from Forge World with on the resin infantry, and so I do need to go through and redo the bases on those things. But yeah. God, I'm just going through this book and remembering there are like vehicles that I forgot that I had painted, like a Typhon siege tank. I'm like, I have one of those. I have 2 demolishers. I have my God. Yeah, that was the other thing was that you were mentioning, like the jump infantry having a bonus to their charge, with getting the additional movement and things like that. So there are things where you don't have all of the rerolls, but you do have, and you can whiff on things, but you do have a little more certainty that's kind of built in as far as like charge distances and things like that, which kind of helps to offset some of the, it also forces the issue, I suppose, for the reactions and things like that. Like if you're going to get charged by something and it's a decent distance away, but it's also in an assault squad that's charging, and you really need that target to not get charged, all of a sudden the retreat reaction becomes something that you're going to do a little bit more. So, yeah, God damn it. No,
and I do like that the reactions exist in different phases of the game because it does force you to remain engaged with your opponent. In the games I've played, there's no phase of the game where I've just gone, okay, like, let me know when you're done.
Yeah.
That occurs a lot less.
Yeah. So, what are things you're looking forward to? Like, with the changes to the game, are there units you feel like you're going to see more? Are there mission changes where you feel like you're going to see differences in playing things? What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to it being supported again. To be perfectly blunt. They've made a lot of noise about this being a game that they're supporting for a while. There's plastic kits that are coming out. Tooling for plastic kits isn't cheap, so they've committed to it. You called it with the what if just Dinos patterned Rhino chassis.
Oh my
God! Now
I'm so glad I was right on that.
I'm super happy that you were right on that. So I think there's a lot of stuff where what I'm looking forward to is seeing where the community can go with things.
Yeah.
And watching it adjust to different things. Because, right now, yeah, you've got rotor cannons are the new hotness because everybody read the Penny Rule and was like, oh, shit. I think we're going to see a lot more anti-tank weaponry because, as you mentioned, both it is a Spartan heavy meta because now everybody owns a plastic Spartan.
Right.
And also, as much as I hate the word meta for Heresy.
Yeah.
And then also, everybody has a bunch of Contemptor Dreadnoughts now.
Yeah.
And Contemptor Dreadnoughts are scary.
Yep.
So, like, you're going to have a plan, and it needs to not be, I guess I'll wing it with an occasional, like, melt-a-gun and hope I luck out.
Right.
Like, that's not gonna solve your problem, buddy.
Well, every sergeant has a melt-a-bomb. It's fine.
Exactly. Like, you cannot rely on, like, I'll just stick a melt-a-bomb on it, and it'll probably work out.
Yeah.
I had that one of the lists I was building for Nova. I was like, oh, yeah, this Breacher Squad has 2 melted guns, and that'll probably be fine. And I'm like, Eric, that is not fine.
It's not okay.
You need to bring more.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to a lot of things like that, like watching people figure out what they want out of the game, and sort of figuring out how the new rules interact with that. Watching people discover the first time you get charged by a bunch of world eaters because you shot at them, I think is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah.
People learning those advanced reactions, figuring out what sort of their corner of this game feels like. The 2 unpainted Xiphon interceptors in my list, in my closet, are like, yeah, we're back, baby.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff like that I think is potentially going to be really cool. How about you?
So for me, it actually is, like you were mentioning, everybody has a Contemptor now. There's going to be, in theory, there was a plastic Contemptor available before, but Knock-Knees McGee was not a real Contemptor.
Venerable brother of those.
Yeah, and as a guy with a lot of dreadnoughts, having the opportunity to field you can take a dreadnought as an HQ and just go YOLO mode and do the whole, just do nothing but Contemptors. That's going to be a very situational thing but I will do it because I can, and God damn it, I will. I think though, with having all these kits in plastic, with having, before, there were people that you would play against that had the means to buy all this stuff. And so they had it, but there were a lot of people that just had, their lists were kind of watered down a little bit, or they would convert some 40K stuff or whatever it was. Now that this stuff is available, and it's not just available like you can afford it from a money standpoint, because it's not like they're cheap, but you can walk into your gaming store and buy it. Like you have a game and you're like, damn it, I need more mobility. A couple of units in Rhinos would be a good idea. And you look at the shelf and there's a couple of Deimos Rhinos sitting there, like that's... Yeah,
you can fix your problem tomorrow.
Yeah, rather than having to order it
in plastic.
Yeah, and I think with having all these units, and I'm hoping as they start doing stuff in plastic, they've got to do a plastic assault squad at some point. I have like a big 20-man assault squad that I love using because world eaters, right? You got to do it. But would I like to have like another 15-man one? You're goddamn right. Of course. Not because I think it's like a amazing game-breaking unit or anything. It's just because it looks fucking amazing when I throw it out there. The other one out there and play with it. So I just, with the greater availability and the game being supported, that's what I'm looking forward to most, is not just seeing better rounded armies or people being able to field a better variety of stuff, but just more people getting involved too. Like you're gonna get the people that are, you like, oh, clearly you just read a Goonhammer article and you have all the rotor cannons or whatever the thing is. Like you're gonna that element will always show up at some point. But I always feel like with the way that these events are structured, and I don't know, and now I'm saying this and talking myself out of it, because before there was like a filtering on the cost end of it, and you're like, well, I've put a lot into this, and so not being a dick is going to be a good idea. And maybe now if it cheapens it a little bit, maybe you do get, I don't know, we'll see. I just talked about something I was excited about and ended up moving it into something that I might not enjoy.
I think if you look at it, but there was that, if you look at sort of the origins of the Centurion play style, which was, sort of a fan thing, which was basically, hey, can we not beat up on the guys who started with the Betrayal of Calth box set?
Yeah.
And like your 1,500 point list shouldn't be a bunch of tactical Marines on one side and then like 2 minimum size squads and a bunch of Vindicators on the other. Like that might not be fun, guys.
Yeah.
And I think sort of community wise, the spirit of that is still there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the accessibility, like if you look at it, the accessibility is a lot of things that people needed anyway. You know, you needed a Contemptor. Like most people picked up a Contemptor Dreadnought of some sort anyway. You needed Rhinos anyway. Yeah. The number of like Facebook heresy groups that are like, is it okay if I use the plastic Rhino? And then you had like either the gatekeepers who were like, no. And then I'd come back with like, the Mars pattern Rhino existed.
Yeah.
Just take it.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I think, you know, the Sakaran was one of the most commonly seen battle tanks because it was the first sort of like heresy special unit that came out. So like I think it importantly is a lot of stuff that people would have eventually bought.
Yeah.
But now it's more accessible. It's in plastic. You know, a lot of people had Spartans. A lot of people had Land Raiders. Yeah. So I also don't think they're units that sort of break the game. So I'm trying to talk you back into it. I think that plastic element is going to be good for people getting into the game, for making it accessible. I mean, the reason I didn't assemble my Spartan and indeed sold it on eBay was I don't want to build a resin Spartan. Like, I just don't want to. Like, that's not how I want to spend a weekend.
Yeah, it's really not. I built 2.
Yeah, like, this is the reason why I, who love flyers, don't own a Fire Raptor. Is because, like, Colin gets 1,000-yard stare every time I use those words, and I'm like, I don't want to do that.
No.
So I think that that's a sort of important element of it is making it more accessible. I think you won't necessarily still have. I mean, it's still an expensive game.
Yeah. And
I think a lot of events and stuff like that, like, no one knows who the top 100 Horus Heresy players are. No one cares.
And hopefully we never do.
And hopefully we never do. And it was funny. There was a I think the Art of War guys did a like ranking the various Space Marine lists, and the primary feedback they got was Heresy players just being like, "Nah, dude, like
you're doing it wrong.
That's not what we do here."
Yeah.
We did get a bunch of people claiming that we were gatekeeping, but I'm weirdly comfortable with that.
Well, the gatekeeping you're doing is just have a little
gatekeeping as a treat.
Yeah, and if your gatekeeping is no, we're trying to keep this fun.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
I'm sort of okay with that.
Yeah.
So speaking of things that worry us, what are you not looking forward to or anticipating become a problem?
Oh my God. Well, with 0 games played, just me reading through the book, I am concerned. I know I'm going to show up because I've heard guys say it locally, and I know I'm going to see the rotor cannon show at some point. Which, I mean, there's ways to get around that, and there's stuff you can do, and blah blah blah. That's fine. I think people will work that out of their system eventually. The other thing would be just, I'm curious to see if the community at some point, even in like small leagues or games, comes up with a way to cap actions. I don't know if it's necessary without playing, but it just seems like there are a lot of ways to sneak in additional actions with warlord traits and things like that. And I'm curious to see if, I mean, as the game gets fleshed out and people start getting used to units, there's always the cream will rise to the top. You know, certain things, units will be obviously more efficient or things like that. And the thing that I hope I don't see, because it is a game and we can't ignore that there are rules and this is how they work. It's hard to know when you know that something is better. It's hard to forget that and use that. And that's the only thing that I don't want. I don't want to see the game get reduced to an efficiency thing. You know, like, to me, I will own 0 rotor cannons. Not because I'm some virtuous person. It's just that I just don't picture a World Eater. If you're holding a rotor cannon, that's at least one chain axe that you're not holding. So I don't see it being a thing. I would convert and field a unit of scouts World Eater scouts with like a chain axe and the little, the Goliath arms and the whole bit. Cause yes, I have thought about doing this conversion. I'm going to field that before I field anything resembling a rotor. Even if I play and go, the rotor cannon is the way. This is the only way to live life. So I hope I just don't see that sneak into the game. If that makes any sense. I think that's more of a, I read the rules and I'm way more paranoid about a thing than it actually will be in real life.
But like, it's definitely, I think, the easy, like, it's a thing that everybody fastened onto because pinning is real good.
Yeah.
And Space Marine leadership is not actually all that good in Horus Heresy. So like, it is definitely a thing. I think we'll see a little bit of that, and then I think there will be a sort of like, I mean, I was talking to somebody who was worried about that in our sort of local group, and I was just like, look, you don't have to play those people.
True.
And like, they will figure out pretty fast that it's real hard to win games if nobody wants to play them. And like, we had a player who actually, I will give him credit for this. He has, it's weird saying this, a fairly brutal Imperial Guard list. That's just doing real well right now in sort of our local Crusade group. And he did on our local Discord go, okay, what about this isn't fun for people?
Mm-hmm.
Is it this? So is it the durability of the Leman Russ? Or is it this and it's the amount of indirect fire I have? And everyone was like, it's the amount of indirect fire. Like, it's no fun if I don't go first, that half my army is going to disappear and there's not a damn thing I can do about it.
Yeah.
And so he took out, like, because his default list had, like, 2 Basilisks and 2 Medusas.
Oh, wow.
He removed enough of that now, like, yeah, he's still got Imperial Guard feeling firepower there.
Right.
But not in a way that you're like, okay, cool, I guess I didn't go first. I'm done.
Right.
So I think that, like, people will, hopefully, I think in most local groups, sort of adjust to that, where if the answer is like, hey, guy, it'd be real nice if, my army got to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the thing I'm sort of worried about, actually, is that PDF. The extended units. Because that has the feeling of not being well maintained.
Right.
Right. Some of it feels a little bit phoned in already.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll admit I'm partially excited about it because I love the Thunderbolt fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is my, like, back when you got paper Forge World catalogs, that was my, like, bucket list flyer, and I own 2 of them. I haven't painted them yet. But in the old Horus Heresy, there was a really janky way to bring them into a Space Marine list that you had to sort of commit to the bit and bring in 3 of them. And I'm like, that's a little expensive for what I'm trying to do here. You can just field this as a single unit now. You can just field a Legion Thunderbolt. And I'm like, that's awesome. What I'm concerned with, though, is that you have things like the Assault Ram lost its Terminators don't count as bulky rule.
Yeah, I saw that.
Was that intended, or did y'all just forget?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of things where it's really ambiguous which one of those is the answer.
Yeah.
Which makes me a little nervous. Or things like there's an Ultramarines Terminator unit in there that seems very expensive but very good.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, some of the people I follow online who I'm sort of the most worried about being the type of people who create the conversation around things that we probably shouldn't bring to the table are real excited about some units that are in that PDF.
Yeah.
But in fairness, like, a lot of it's also increases accessibility. So, like, they have Indominus pattern Terminator armor so that people who just have a bunch of Terminators can play Horus Heresy, and, like, all the Imperial Fist players are annoyed because you get Deep Strike and Storm Shields like we do. They're worse, but we get them. But on the other hand, like, the guy who has 20 Ultramarine Terminators has a Horus Heresy army now. That's kind of... So I'm not really sure. The PDF just makes me nervous as one of those. Either a bunch of the units I have on there aren't going to be able to be played because events are just going to go, no, we're doing core only. Basically it's sort of a like, I'm worried that the jank in that list is going to drag everybody else down with it. Is my primary thing, is that has the feeling of something that doesn't get well maintained. So that's I think the thing I'm the most worried about.
And that's why, so there were elements of that, and there were elements. I mean, we've gone through the 40K Forge World, not even Legends, the 40K Forge World stuff, where you're like, yeah, this was not, and that's it. Really, it had that smell to it. As I was going through the PDF, I was like, some of this is,
Some of this is real good. Some of this is terrible.
And that's why I wonder if they put that little line in there, like, look, we're not going to say it right now that these can't be used in organized play or whatever, because if people want to run a narrative event, like, if there's some sort of a thing where you're supposed to be, you know, breaching some sort of a fortress or a shipboarding action or whatever, or, you know, setting up something for a boarding action in the next meeting or the next game, of course, this, you know, rams should be used. Assault rams should absolutely be used and be able to be in there. But it's like, I just wonder in there, as I was looking through the units that were put into that, there's what, like the Phobos Land Raider was in there. So like the Mark II.
Classic, sort of classic Mark II Land Raider.
Yeah, that one's in there. I have 2 of those. And I was like, that's fair. That's fine if they do that. You know, especially if they make a plastic Proteus one. Like, it's all will be forgiven. Trust me. But as I was looking through, there were, you know, and even like with the World Eaters, you know, putting the Inducti and who's the character, Surlak, in there. Yeah. I'm not crying. I've never used that unit because it just felt too gamey before. And so I could see events where people are like, look, maybe you're limited to like 1 unit from that entire thing.
From Legends or something.
Or, you know, and I think that would solve it. I think that would be fine. It would make it work. So, man.
But I think initially I agree with you. You're going to have to use it because the person who's built their army around an assault ram doesn't necessarily have time to be like, oh, I need to rethink my whole army and paint new units.
Yeah.
So for a while, I think we're going to have it. I personally sort of like the old Forge World army lists. Mm-hmm. I would not build my army around the assumption that the units in that exist if I didn't already have them. Like, I wouldn't go buy up a bunch of new stuff, planning on a Garland, Surlak, and Inducti World Eaters list. I wouldn't bank on that. So that's sort of my sort of feeling on it. Is I'm a little trepidatious about it.
Yeah.
Both because I think some of it won't be maintained, and then some of it probably should have just been cast into the void.
Yeah.
But for the moment, I think it's sort of a caution thing, not a like, oh yeah, this has definitely broken the game.
Yeah. Man, I'm jumping over the Zone Mortalis thing because we'll finish on that because you've been playing that. I just picked up the White Dwarf yesterday that has the rules for it. And oh, goddamn, does that look fun? And goddamn, do I need to hit up Carl to, I was like, I do know a man who has 2 4x4 tables because I painted them for him. Holy shitballs, I need to play that. But this kind of plays into it, what we were just talking about though. Where do you hope that they go with Heresy from here? And I'm asking this question because yesterday when the Angron picture, or the day before yesterday or whatever it was, when the Angron picture was released, I said this before, I was like, I'm really hoping with like the Mark 6 armor stuff and all this that they will have stuff for rules for Siege of Terra and things like that. Like when I looked at that Angron model, I'm like, is he too far gone for Harris for like Siege of Terra? And I don't think the answer's no on that. I think that there would be a way to use it. And
having just listened to the part of Saturnine where he shows up.
Yeah.
No, like
Well, and
bring that bad boy out.
Yeah, and that's the thing is when I mean, because, and thank you for like the 50th time for recommending that I read Saturnine. That's a fucking amazing book. But when they're describing the world eaters that are storming the walls and how they are just clearly not okay, you know,
they're broken. They're full on.
Yeah, I mean, you have room for possessed, you know, and things like that. And so I'm hoping that as it progresses, that there is a way for them to start working in, and this is only for ultralight heresy, like Siege of Terra type stuff. If there's some sort of an expansion for doing that, or units that are only available to use in that, that's where I hope they go with it. But I mean, this could be also just like general game changes that you hope they do, or even ways of introducing it, like a codex for each legion or something like that. I mean, what's kind of on your wish list for it?
So my wish list is basically the same as yours. We are when the sort of box set for this comes out, you know, you have the cool intro video with Horus.
Yeah.
You're at the cusp of things having gone real wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's the Eye of Horus podcast divided traders into traders and witchy poo traders. And right now we don't have a lot of witchy poo.
Yeah.
We should.
Oh, yes, we should.
Like in the Siege of Terra, the Death Guard are not okay.
No.
The World Eaters are broken.
Yeah.
The Emperor's Children are not okay.
Well, they kind of never were, but yeah, they're even more not okay.
But they've gone deep down that particular rabbit hole. And so I would potentially like to see an expansion that starts exploring that for the trader side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the loyalist side of things, it would be really cool to see sort of at the same time a much more aggressive use of the allies mechanism. So like right now they have a right of war for the Space Wolves that is a allied detachment only right of war.
Okay.
That is essentially the Space Wolf watch packs that got sent to keep an eye on folks.
Yeah.
Who all got promptly slaughtered because I don't know why anyone thought that was a good idea, but but they're there. I would love to see, because so many of the Siege of Terra books have, you know, this is mostly the White Scars with a little bit of Blood Angels in there, or like the wall is being held by Imperial Fists and Blood Angels. I'd love to see an expansion of that where you can sort of field the Siege of Terra defenders as an army.
Yeah.
Rather than just like, I play Imperial Fists. Because like Janita Kroll and some sisters should show up and kick ass.
Right.
So I'm hoping for that. I would love to see that sort of, as you mentioned, sort of borrowing from the mechanics of something like Flames of War, where you have like early war, mid war, and late war units.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, the like running on all fours, chain axes somehow still in their hands and also their feet.
Yeah.
World Eaters are a like late war World Eaters unit.
Yeah.
Like you shouldn't build an army around that, but you should definitely dust one in for, you know, a proper the World Eaters are broken version of this.
Yeah.
I would love to see something like that. The other thing I would really like to see is sort of an exploration and expanding the various ways to play Heresy. Like I think they've done a good job with Zone Mortalis.
Yeah.
The rules for that. I would love to see more of that. And that can be in White Dwarf. Like I'd love to have like White Dwarf have a bunch of different Zone Mortalis missions, because right now there's only one.
Yeah.
I would love to see them acknowledging things like they did a really good job. They put in the rules this time, and I'll talk about that a little bit, for like the Necromunda terrain has ladders. So we should probably have rules for ladders. So some of the interaction with other game systems and recognizing that you can pull things from them. I'd like to see, and then I'd like to see one of the things the Black Books did really well is campaign systems.
Yeah.
I think Heresy is really well designed for campaigns.
Yeah.
It just screams campaigns. It's easy to do. You don't have to do this is the Imperials versus Chaos, and then what do we do with the Tyranid players? The answer is like, this is Loyalists versus Traitors.
Yeah.
Pick a side. I would like to see a little bit more of that. One of the design cues I really liked is the Loyalist and Traitor Warlord traits.
Yeah.
In legions that you think only go one way. Like there's a Trader Ultramarines Warlord trait, and that's awesome.
Oh, I see. I didn't buy the Loyalist book because I have zero use for it.
There's a
that's
Trader
incredible.
Ultramarines one that's essentially like, maybe we should run our own thing. And so like, so I think there's a lot of cool and interesting things they can do with that, and I'd like them to just sort of play in the setting a bit. Yeah. But really, I think what I most want to see is we are headed towards late war.
Yeah.
You know, start having demons be a thing.
Yeah.
You know, the Demons of the Ruinstorm list was a great hobby playground for people, but I don't know that it was ever a good rule set.
Yeah.
Having that be a rule set that you can be like, yep, this is White Scars versus demons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would I think be really, really cool.
Yeah, you were mentioning the campaign thing too. It wouldn't be that hard. Like you're mentioning, they could do it in White Dwarf things. I mean, because they have been releasing, you know, historic missions and things like that. Yeah. But I mean, it would be really fun to see one to do with, you know, World Eaters, Word Bearers, and Ultramarines. You know, and like, I don't want to say, you know, go full bore crusade because ain't nobody got time for that. But having your characters, you know, if you kept track of, you know, if you have a World Eaters Centurion, you know, units or challenges they win or whatever it is, you know, sort of sending them down the eightfold path a little quicker, but then also having drawbacks and, you know, when they're injured and quirks and things like that. And so like for the defenders, it could be like Imperial Defenders, it could be more something that's more of like a mentality thing, you know, where it's and versus the traders, you know, I mean, all of that, you know, aggression and the nails ticking constantly will, you know, take a toll at some point. And Word Bearers are getting, you know, they're strapping things to the holes of rhinos and taking a little too long with, you know, the deeper they get into the bringing on the Ruinstorm and all that sort of stuff. So it's like,
and I think one thing you touched on that you could do is genuinely different types of campaigns. You know, there's sort of the grand scale strategic, you know, claiming little map quadrants, playing 3,000 point games version. There's also like, in one of the very early books is like, for like, you know, the Raven Guard at Isfahan and stuff like that, there is a like, so your dudes are running out of ammunition.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do about that?
Right. Right.
Sometimes that heavy bolter squad just goes silent because it's out of heavy bolters.
Yeah.
And, you know, Joshua Chamberlain yells bayonets and charges. So that's, you know, what is, you know, different types of those things, or like, you know, what does a Zone Mortalis campaign look like?
Yeah. Yeah.
I would love to see that stuff fleshed out. And you could do that in White Dwarf. You could do that in a book. I think there's a lot of different ways to go about it.
Now, I was mentioning just spitballing as an idea. If they were to do, because before they kind of did, well, no, they really didn't do individual codexes. Because I mean, the black books were a story. You might get a couple of, you know, beginning it was like rules for a legion and a couple of characters, but then later you could sprinkle different ones in. Maybe that is the way. I'm curious because like, and I think this might be a reaction to 40K just getting too much shit all the time. Is that the way? Just keep the World Eaters core stuff the way it is, and maybe in an expansion book that includes other stuff. So maybe if you and some, you know, people want to run a campaign or whatever, only one person needs to buy the book. They sprinkle in a unit or a character or something like that that you can use, and maybe like you're saying, it's only for this campaign or whatever. Let me back up. That's my hope for this, is that it's supported, but that it doesn't turn into 40K where this is just a constant churning meat grinder that is smoking on a fire all the time. As far as just putting too much stuff out. I'd love to see this game not lose itself at some point with just too much shit. And just maintain that balance of just enough interest, just enough stuff coming out, just enough new that you don't feel like it's abandoned, and don't tinker with it unless you absolutely fucking have to. I think those are my, so basically don't make it 40K right now. I think would be my hope.
That would be my hope. I think one of the things I'm hoping to see is as they bring out the sort of non-Space Marine books, I think the way a lot of Heresy players expressed their continual interest was in a second army, or a third, fourth, and fifth army. I would love to see the Mechanicum as a thing that you can, I'll just do a Zone Mortalis Force of those guys, and then 3,000 points later,
right,
got,
right,
Ordinatus and whatnot.
Gotcha.
So I think that because like this is really what happens, or like one of the things that always bothered me is like if I had before this sort of came out and they started releasing the kits and stuff, if I wanted to start a trader army at this point, like half the stuff most people would use to make their army look cool aren't available anymore.
Yeah.
The shoulder pads are gone, the special things are gone, the transfer sheets are hard to find.
Yeah.
So it's actually really hard, I think, to start a second or third army for Heresy.
Yeah.
I would like that not to be true.
Yeah.
I'd like that to be like, I really want to explore the trader side of this, or Mechanicum seems cool, or Solar Auxilia seems cool.
Yeah.
And to sort of bring those units in, and have that work a little better, I think is what I would do for the Games Workshop. Well, if we don't keep selling you books, where are we making money doing this?
Yeah.
The answer is, once I finish my Imperial Fists, maybe I want to start something else.
Yeah.
And it would be nice if there was enough there sort of waiting for that.
Man, as we're rounding this out, I'm like, oh, that would have been a perfect ending, but we do need to talk about Zone Mortalis, man. So yeah, me jumping that like the Dukes of Hazzard on fire is going to throw off the flow a little bit here, but and your dogs agree. They're like, damn it, you should have gone through that.
Agree. They really should have stopped.
So yeah, you're gonna have that mic on because we're going into Zone Mortalis, and this is all you. So the Zone Mortalis rules they release, you've played. I've seen pictures of several games that you've played, and it seems like your Imperial Fists are living their Terminators are living their absolute best life. Sell us on what is good about this part of Heresy gaming.
So Zone Mortalis is great for a couple reasons. First of all, before I forget it, they solve your. I hope there's a way to restrict the number of reactions. In the Zone Mortalis rules is. You get one reaction per phase.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what warlord traits you have. It doesn't matter what else you have. You get one, and they're from this list. And the reactions are much more mild.
Okay.
I think because essentially they recognize that the ones out of the core book and the advanced ones will go funny in a 500-point game.
Yeah.
Now, what I love about Zone Mortalis is, first of all, as I mentioned way in the start of the show, like Void War is my true heart and soul for 40K. Zone Mortalis is small unit actions, but they're still units.
Yeah.
So you get that sort of fast skirmish feel. It's basically like What If Space Hulk, but just Space Marines.
Yeah.
And I really like that feeling because you get units, they act like they're supposed to.
Yeah.
You don't have to remember that this is Sergeant so-and-so with this thing, and this is my specialist with a Vox set. It's just like, this is a tactical squad. It works like a tactical squad. But you get, because there's some like really cramped confines, assault units do way better than they normally do in games. Some units just get sort of upgunned. So like flamers become really, really dangerous because if your whole unit is lined up in a corridor, flame templates are real good.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff like that I just like about Zone Mortalis. I think they look beautiful as games because you have very dense terrain, really sort of claustrophobic settings. The rule set, I think, does a really good job of making it feel different, but in a way that doesn't require a lot of memory. So like anything that's got a template weapon to it gets +1 to wound because essentially you're in these corridor confines, things are bouncing off the walls. Similarly, if you lose combat, you're in bigger trouble. The winner has +1 to their combat resolution, and if you retreat, there's sort of all your guys are wearing the like I'm a bomb technician, if you see me running, try to keep up. So like as you run, like if a unit retreats past another unit, that unit has to take a morale check. So like, should we just be getting out of here, guys? So there's some little changes like that are good that I think turn up and then also turn off some of the lethality by tinkering with reactions. The list I have right now, because it's what I have painted, that's just like yep, this makes sense as a logical unit.
Yeah.
Is a Imperial Fist Terminator squad in Tartarus pattern Terminator armor with storm shields and mostly power fists. A Legion champion, who is real good. That is my discovery, is the weapon skill table. Weapon skill 6 is a big deal.
Yeah.
If you're fighting mostly weapon skill 5 other characters, the combination of weapon skill 5 and a AP2 at initiative weapon, because Legion champions can take Paragon blades, is real good. He's just been taking heads this whole couple games I've played.
As
did a
you
learning
should.
game with
As
a
you
learning
should.
game with a guy who started in 8th. So that was really fascinating to be like, oh, I need to explain to you the whole conceptual foundations of the old ways.
Yeah.
He played my list and promptly just destroyed me.
Wow.
But that's been really fun. And then essentially a naked tactical squad.
Yeah.
Which, even being pretty bare bones, because the Imperial Fists have ballistic skill 5 with bolters, that's a not nothing unit.
Wow.
I will say the Zone Mortalis mission, I think, is really good for trying to balance the impulse to just murder people versus holding the objectives. So the last one I played was against a Death Guard player, and we tied. Because I went for what if just murder? Because as it turns out, 5 Terminators and a Legion champion and 500 points basically just leaves the walls spattered with the remains of whatever they come in contact with.
Yes.
But they're bad at holding objectives, because there's no way that you're just going to have 5 Assault Terminators sitting on an objective for 5 turns of a game going like, oh, well, we're doing real good, guys. That's just not how anybody who painted that unit do. So if you play Canny, you can force some uncomfortable decisions there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a really good rule set. I think it's really good for small games. I have noticed the guys in the club who are playing small games that are not Zone Mortalis seem to have the games get real skewed very fast.
Yeah.
Especially if they're bringing units outside of the box set. So like, if someone brings a Vindicator and you don't have a way to answer a Vindicator,
you're fucked.
You're fucked.
Yeah.
And at 500 points, you're fucked pretty fast.
And if you've been playing since 8th edition, you're like, a Vindicator? Oh, that's going to be fine. You're like, no, it's not okay.
No, it's not okay. Let's talk about template weapons. So I think that, or like if that Vindicator gets, penetrated on the first hit and blows up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're done.
So I think Zone Mortalis is really good. Essentially, we're doing a slow grow league in the local area, and I have been encouraging people for the first quarter, essentially, to do 750 to 1,000 point Zone Mortalis lists to just get a feel for the game, be able to get an idea for reactions, but have them be much less impactful. So like my opponent in the last game brought some 10 flamer with Death Guard chemical weapons nonsense.
Yeah.
Like that was
Fleshbane.
scary. Yeah. And like I started like playing around with some reactions like, okay, your equivalent of Overwatch fire only triggers if I move. So if I don't move and I just charge you, so there's some stuff like that you can sort of get used to, sort of trying to bait and play with reactions.
Yeah.
But it's not the full on like, but if that unit got to both return fire and charge, and Overwatch, they just rule the entire game.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really good way to do that. It's in a White Dwarf, so it's easy to sort of pick up. There's not that much to it.
Yep.
There's, I think, one sort of thing they overlooked where they turn off, where for most games they turn off people who can deep strike because they imagine them coming down on jump packs.
Yeah.
They forgot teleport as a thing. But like that's an easy house rule. That's just like, oh yeah, when we said no deep strike, we didn't mean teleporters.
Right. Right.
Or, ripping open the fabric of reality or whatever. Traitor nonsense that we don't concern ourselves with here.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's a really great way to play the game. It always looks nice. It helps if you know someone who has Zone Mortalis stuff.
Oh my god, yeah.
I have I have an MDF set from Death Ray Designs that works real well and paints up pretty fast.
Yeah. There's
Necromunda stuff. There's the old Forge World stuff. I've been playing with the Ash Waste terrain as sort of experimenting with that. I have some thoughts on that as Zone Mortalis that I'll probably write up for Variance Hammer at some point.
Yeah.
The answer is you need more of the big buildings, but it's a very different feeling because you get a lot more shooting in that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it. There's cargo containers make perfectly good Zone Mortalis things. You're in a dockyard somewhere.
Sure.
It's just a really fun way to play the game.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, one where the units I have painted are really quite good.
Right.
That army is currently undefeated. And the current record holder for number of those Terminators killed is 2.
Wow.
Yeah, because just all Terminators have 2 wounds.
Yeah.
And 3-up invulnerable saves are rare in Horus Heresy. So 2 wounds and a 3-up invulnerable save Terminators is
wow.
They're durable. They don't die.
Brutal. I was just having while you were talking, I was kind of like, I always have to fidget and look at things on my desk and everything. Just being a twitchy bastard that I am. And I kept glancing over at the Mark 6s that I put together what was your text comment? I got to pull it up. Initially, I was kind of struggling with the idea of Mark 6 stuff in a World Eaters army because it's like the least World Eaters thing I've ever seen them, But then as I was looking, I'm like, they're taller, lankiness and stuff. And I'm just painting up the Praetor with the giant axe. I'm using the Berserker head with, the stuff carved into his head and everything like that from the Forge World kit. And I was like, I don't mind actually painting up these like late Heresy. These are, vat grown maniacs. It really, doesn't really matter. And I was like, I'm just going to throw chain bayonets on them. And I think you called what did you call this? You're going to need to express yourself, so fuck it. Here's a chain bayonet is the most teacher who plays 40K sentence ever written. And I was like, I'm deep in both of those games, and I'm very happy about this. But what I realized was painting those, if I hadn't even thought of this, is like painting towards the Zone Mortalis list. This is some crazy full circle shit. That's exactly how I started painting this army, was through the independent characters, paint a Zone Mortalis list and then, do all this stuff. I think in 2015 or 16, 15, is when I did World Eaters. And I'm like, that might be the way to get me back into doing these with the Slow Grow League there are enough guys with like Necromunda terrain and things like that I think we actually could pull that off. I'm gonna pitch that to the guys. Yeah.
Is you get that immediate feedback of like, yeah, I painted this unit and I've now seen it play.
Yeah.
Whereas like, I think Proper Heresy, I think they've stated as like 3,000 points.
Yeah.
It's a long time before anyone new is going to be fielding 3,000 painted points of anything. Yep. But 500 painted points just isn't that hard.
Yeah.
And you can do that progress. You can start mixing that in.
Yeah.
The boards just get bigger. Like Zone Mortalis, the only thing that changes is like, oh, you're playing 1,000 points. The board gets bigger and you get Warlord traits now.
Right. Oh man, we're going to have to try that. We're going to have to do that. Well, man, part of this, it wasn't just that I knew that you would want to talk about this, and that I wanted to save a full Battlefleet Gothic thing. This was also me trying to get myself pumped up because I really do want to paint these Mark 6 guys with the, I don't get to say chain bayonet enough in my life, and if you're going to have a World Eater who's not holding a chain axe, they're going to have to express themselves somehow. They get a chain bayonet and I'm all here for it. So, yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
So in closing, before we go, we do need to plug really quick. So, Tom Taylor Big Show, 40 Curious, where he has a topic he brings on. It was really intimidated when I did it because he brought on, he was pitching the premise, or he was pitching the idea to me that Kimura is a sort of satirical play on the United States. And so I believe the episode's called like the United States of Kimura. I think the format got thrown off a little bit because I think he was bringing people in to do more of it and he was interviewing versus I think he forgot that I'm a podcast host. And so I know the rule that when you go on somebody else's show, you shut the fuck up and let them do their thing. So I think I was just sort of like working through his argument a little bit more. You're on the next episode 5. Can you kind of give like a teaser promo thing for that?
Yeah. So for those who haven't heard 40 Curious, it's essentially a deep dive into some sort of semi-philosophical topic on sort of 40K. The one we're doing is sort of the role of math and probability in 40K. We've got Tom. He has a colleague or friend who's a statistician, and then myself. And we talk about some things like the Nova Canon and the idea that human beings have this tendency, and it's weird. We start talking about math and we end up talking mostly about human psychology.
Yeah.
We remember bad things that happened
Right.
Really well. So like in Josh's mind is forever etched the Nova Canon one-shots things.
Yeah.
Even though that's not necessarily how Nova Canons work. And so we're sort of talking about that both sort of philosophically and then how this works, mathematically and how to actually think about this game a little bit. Those take a long time to edit, so they're a little bit dated. We'll talk about a meta that no longer exists in 40K.
Sure.
But the principles are pretty well structured, and Tom's show has been really fun to both be on and listen to.
Yeah.
I love the Kimura episode. I sent him thoughts later about. I think that the Covens are actually the British civil service, not the defense industry, but like,
interesting.
But yeah, I've been really enjoying his podcast. So yeah, if you all want to listen to that, Brian's on the latest released episode, and then I will be on the next one.
Yeah. Now, before we go, Eric, do you have a D6 at your desk?
I do.
You're gonna
have one from Herrick Games.
Okay. By the way, if you'd like to get all of your Games Workshop stuff, 15% off, go to herrickgames.com, your friendly local gaming store that just happens to be online. And no, Sky does not. I pay the same fucking price you pay, so that is not a paid promo. It's just good people deserve your business. So, give me first roll a D6 and just don't roll a 1.
4.
Okay, good. This will all mean something in a second. This is great radio. I'm making you roll dice and listen as I write shit down. Roll a D6 and then a second one and tell me the first and second results.
2 and 6.
Ooh, that's fucking spicy. Another D6.
5.
Oh, that got weird. All right. And another D6.
1.
Whoa, that really got weird. Okay. And I know this is great radio. I'll even go off axis on the mic too, just to like really play into the whole, I'm forgetting I'm doing a show here. Last one. One more D6.
4.
Wow. That is a bunch of contradictory nonsense, which is kind of perfect. So, what you were rolling for is in the kill team thing where you can like roll up the narrative for your thing. I hate writing background for these things, and honestly, I'm putting models together, and I was like, I have a lot of bits that'll work for these, and I just need some sort of a background to build it towards, and that's going to be fine. So I am not for 40K, but for Kill Team, I am officially ending my pointy-eared vacation. So I started assembling my Corsairs, and I just wanted to know which bits to lean into. You're supposed to choose if you want them to be Cobalite Descent or Asuryani. So that was the one was going to be Asuryani because you know how I roll.
Yeah.
The Kill Team
wasn't ever actually an option.
You rolled up the Dark Ravagers for the name, which I'm okay with.
It's a decent name.
Their base of operations, though, is a craft world, which is all right.
Doesn't have to be a working craft world.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that actually pays into my thing. Craft world. Firm allies with one of the craft worlds. This kill team has arming chambers and storage facilities above their allies' world vessel. I still like your idea that it doesn't have to work. I like that. It's just a fucking locker. Background, I rolled bound to the craft world. Though independent, Corsairs of the Kill Team have an alliance with one of the vast Asuryani craft worlds, frequently fighting alongside its warriors and providing it with information in the galaxy's events. I think there's like some sort of a dark hitch to that where it's not really by choice.
This feels like some sort of Farseer's death curse or something.
Exactly. The squad quirk, they are independent of spirit, which all of a sudden doesn't make sense. They fight for no one other than themselves and make their own fortunes. So It doesn't have to make sense. It's fine. I'm just trying to figure out what bits to go
It's
to.
Kill Team.
It's Kill Team. So yeah, I like the idea though of a group that, yeah, I like the Death Curse idea. I like this one. They don't want him, but they got it. I'm into it. All right. I just needed something to inform what kind of bits and characters and things like that to lean into. And these are some fiddly shit models that I love the look of, but a right arm holding a rifle does not need to be 2 fucking pieces.
Yeah. I confess, not approached mine for the same reason.
The other night I was looking at him and I'm like, I really want to put a Wraith Cannon together on an infantry model, and I'm all okay with that. But when I got to the Felarch, I was like, I don't know which direction to lean into it. I really want to lean into the Dark Eldar stuff. And so this will, I'm just going to force this to be a Dark Eldar thing, because they are the Dark Ravagers that are bound to a craft world, but independent and not, it doesn't have to make sense. It was D6 rolls. So next episode, that's that. Maybe next episode I'll complain a little more about gluing right arms to right forearms with shuriken rifles and things like that. Next episode, we are committing to absolutely nothing. We don't know what the fuck we're going to talk about, and I am totally okay with that.
I'm weirdly at peace.
All right. Any last thoughts before we go out on Heresy?
Nope, that's it.
Just fucking
play more Heresy. Buy the starter box. Play Heresy.
There we go. And that's a fucking